The windows of my room do not face directly onto the street, but onto the balcony. As long as I can remember, I've always been afraid to look there when evening came. I've always seen creepy shadows and strange sounds. One evening, as usual, I was sitting in my room and playing computer. I was distracted by the noise from the balcony. Someone was loudly banging empty cans. Turning around, I saw my mother there. She noticed me, apparently decided to play a joke, and came close to the window so that the light of my lamp illuminated her face. Admittedly, it was a little creepy. I giggled and continued to watch. Meanwhile, my mother opened her mouth wide, as if carefully pronouncing the letter O, and her eyes were terribly bulging. She did not look away from me. With a thud, her forehead hit the glass. It was the only sound that accompanied the whole scene. I was already really scared. Then she narrowed her eyes and began to smile so terribly. That smile gave me goosebumps. "Mom, that's enough!" I shouted desperately. Mom's voice came from the hallway with an incomprehensible intonation. Turning around, I saw her in the doorway with a comb in her hands. It turned out that all this time she was standing at the mirror in the hallway. With screams, I ran up to her, and only tightly grabbing her hand, decided to look out the window. There was nothing there. I confusingly told my mother about everything I saw. Together we checked the balcony, the window glass, but found nothing. In the morning, I continued to pester my mother with questions, and she told me the following. When she was 9 years old, a similar story happened to her. He and his mother, my grandmother, lived in a private house. One winter evening, Grandma, as usual, began to gather for a shift at work. She worked at a bakery, so she often had to leave at night. After she left, Mom cleaned up the house and decided to go to bed. Before going to bed, she wanted to drink water, and she went to the kitchen. Turning on the light, she shuddered. Her grandmother was sitting at the table in her usual housecoat. Holding her cheek with one hand, she stared intently at her mother, as if she had been sitting in the dark all this time and waiting for her to come. Her lips were stretched into a creepy smile. Mom asked her what happened, why she came back, but Grandma was silent and continued to smile. My mother told me that her smile made her feel uneasy, and goosebumps ran through her body. Then the grandmother's face was distorted by a grimace of rage. She slammed her fist on the table and began to say something incomprehensible about the coffin and the funeral. At the same moment, the light bulb in the kitchen burst and there was an impenetrable darkness. Mom hardly remembers what happened next. She ran to the neighbors and they decided that thieves had broken into her grandmother's house. The police arrived, but no traces of forced entry and unauthorized people could be found. Mom never told this story to Grandma. She always said that it seemed to her that someone had broken into the house and she was scared. Grandma is still alive, and what those words about the coffin meant still remains a terrible secret. The second story. My sister and I lived together, and we had a bad, stupid habit of not locking the door behind us when returning home. In the morning, you go to study and find that you slept all night with the door open. Disputes and clarification begin. Who came in last? One night, the front door opened from a strong draft and began to slam. We were very scared at that time, but the bad habit did not go away. They still forgot to close the door. However, after a while something happened that forever accustomed us to close the door with all the locks. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Suddenly, I decided to check the front door. I was too lazy to get up, but the desire was intrusive and unapproachable. Something inside made me do it. I went into the corridor, touched the door, and saw that it was not closed again. I turned the upper key 4 turns, and for some reason turned the lower one, which we usually never used, and did not close on it. I took literally 2 steps towards the room when I heard unusual strange sounds outside the door. There was a feeling that someone was running his palms over the door from the other side, feeling it and patting it. Although startled by the surprise, I turned around with the intention of at least looking through the peephole. I came close to the door and noticed that the handle began to turn up and down, as if someone was trying to open the door to get inside. Suddenly, there was a strange, irregular knocking. I suddenly felt cold, my heart ached. Neither fear nor horror, but some kind of black longing, muddy and incomprehensible anxiety crept into the soul. I didn't want to look through the peephole. Quietly began to retreat into the room. I thought they were thieves, and mentally decided to run into the room to wake up my sister and call the police. My sister woke up and was about to tell me something, but I signaled her to be silent. She immediately realized that something was wrong. Her eyes widened, a reflection of fear frozen in them. Then I remembered that I have one device that I almost never used, namely a video camera that shoots the landing and is connected to the computer. It was long ago brought as a gift by my ex-boyfriend, who worked at that time in a company engaged in the installation of video surveillance systems. We played a couple of times then and forgot about the camera, but now I remembered about it. I don't know what trait of human character makes us look into the eyes of fear. So I sat down at the computer and launched the image of the site. I don't know what it was, but I saw it, and my sister saw it too. Something wrapped in some dark pieces of clothing, unnaturally moving, wandered around the playground, scratching at the doors and pulling the handles, crouching and listening to the sounds in the apartments, looking into the eyes. The head of this neck was also wrapped in rags, dark hands sticking out of them, long, narrow, with unnaturally long fingers. Several more times this creature came to my door and crouched down to it. It seemed that the heart would stop. The sister was crying. She bit the edge of the sheet so as not to make a sound. Confused, I read prayers to myself and asked God to spare us, and soon this creature crawled down, and the early July dawn appeared on the street. An hour later, we came to our senses. I regret that my sister saw it. She is still in shock. I can see how everything is very scary and creepy for her. It's been a long time, and I'm still sitting and thinking what would have happened if I hadn't closed the door. Perhaps we would have been found with a lot of bites and blood on the walls, or as in horror movies we would have been found in the corner of the room with terrified faces and cardiac arrest. Or does this creature crawl into the soul and a man with empty eyes goes to the kitchen for a knife? Or does he step out of the window? What would it be? I don't know, and I don't want to know. Close the doors, take care of yourself. The third story. I will tell this story on behalf of my friend, Amanda. Amanda lived a normal life. I played with my girlfriends, kept a personal diary, studied at school. She had the most ordinary working-class parents. Wonderful mom and dad. Everything was fine. And then he appeared. Amanda told me that the first time she saw him was in the park. She and her friends were playing in the sandbox, and he was standing near the bushes nearby. It was an old man, in ragged clothes and with a strange expression on his face. Amanda saw that he was looking at her. She told her friend about it, but when she didn't see the suspicious old man, she laughed and forgot about what had happened. Time passed, and he still appeared on the street and looked at her with big yellow eyes. Every day the old man stood closer and closer. And that made Amanda even scarier. Then he started following her everywhere. None of her friends had seen him. Her parents also didn't see anything and said that she had watched movies or was overtired. And sometimes they just said that Amanda was making things up, as is typical of many children. But after a while the old man began to appear already at school. He could sit on the far desk and look at her. It scared her a lot. Amanda couldn't relax and rest. He was sitting in the subway car when she was driving home. The old man was everywhere, and every day he stood closer and closer. And a week ago, Amanda saw him at home. He was sitting on the ceiling. His nasty bearded head, long rotten teeth, and big yellow eyes stared at her without blinking. The old man did not stop smiling in his terrible grimace. Amanda thought she was going crazy. She didn't sleep well and was getting weaker every day, and he was getting scarier and bigger. The parents began to notice that something was wrong with their daughter and decided to go to the hospital the very next day. That terrible night, Amanda, as usual, went to bed. Mom wished her good night and closed the door. Then the girl lost consciousness. I woke up only the next morning in the hospital. She vaguely remembered what had happened. My parents and the doctor were standing before my eyes. Mom was in tears, and Dad hugged her tightly. Amanda realized that something very bad had happened. She was diagnosed. It was cancer. Every day he was getting closer to her, like that creepy old man, and getting stronger. Hallucinations? They hurriedly started treatment, and a month later the doctor made them happy. The tests became good, and after treatment, remission began, and the cancer began to recede. She was very lucky to be discovered at the stage when he can be almost completely defeated. And the old man began to appear less and less often, and after 6 months he completely disappeared.